Shaping the Future, Keeping Us Human. Les recordamos que esto es un evento bilingüe, que para los que no hayan podido acceder a los auriculares, en esa salita de la izquierda podrán utilizar el idioma con el que se sientan más cómodos. Vamos a hacer sesiones, como bien han venido presenciando desde esta mañana, en ambos idiomas. Muy brevemente en español y enseguida volvemos a cambiar al inglés. Les damos de nuevo la bienvenida a nuestro evento Global Education Forum. Nos estamos hoy convirtiendo en el epicentro de la discusión en tema de inteligencia artificial en todo el mundo, aquí en la nueva sede, esta sede impresionante del campus nuevo de Castellana de la Camilo José Cela. Les comunico que además en estos momentos, porque están ustedes aquí de manera presencial, pero también estamos retransmitiéndolo a través de nuestros canales y todas nuestras plataformas digitales en vivo y en directo por livestream, y que cerca de 1.600 personas están conectadas ahora, siguiendo también vía remoto estas sesiones, por supuesto, muchos profesores y también estudiantes. Continuamos con las presentaciones de expertos. La irrupción de la inteligencia artificial en la educación empieza ¿dónde? En los colegios. Seguro que muchos profesores ya os habrán comentado cómo sus alumnos adaptan esas herramientas de la inteligencia artificial generativa antes que ellos mismos. Precisamente para conocer cómo impacta la IA en la educación escolar, voy a pedir a un experto que hoy nos acompaña, que viene también de muy lejos. Él es Fadel. Let me now switch to English to introduce him. He is the founder and CEO of the Center for Curriculum Redesign. We would love to hear more from his expertise on the vision of the impact of the AI in the education in general, and in particular in the K12. Fadel is a global education thought leader, an author, a futurist, we can say too, an inventor, and he's also an expert for AI at the OECD. So please, Charles, welcome. You can now take the stage.
Thank you. Thank you. So, well, I'm a human intelligence. I'm here to mention to you that one of the things we have to face is being overly anthropomorphic when we deal with these things, because we tend to trust them too much. Just because it has a nice face and, quite honestly, an unreal body, right? I'm sure women will say, wait a second. We have the tendency to overly believe some of the technologies we create. So there's always a hype moment where we're all excited and there are cool toys like this that show up, and then reality settles, and then the real work starts. So we're going to be talking about what the real work is about. I've been lucky enough in my career to be involved with AI since, okay, I'm going to disclose my age, 1989, when, as Mark was saying earlier, the whole world was going into symbolic AI because we did not have the processing power. At the time, my AI company, Neural Networks, could compute only 3 layers of neurons. Now we can compute more than 5,000 layers. We have massive databases, we have specialized processors, and the world has changed. But we also have to keep in mind that progress is always this punctuated equilibria. We had knowledge representation networks and symbolic AI in the 80s. Then in the 2010s, it took 30 years for the processing capability to catch up to use neural networks efficiently, and then another decade to get into large language models, again, all due to large data sets. And now we're moving into this situation of AI systems, which I'm going to describe in a second. What we're not going to see anytime soon is general intelligence or superintelligence. Now, I'll explain why in a moment, but we really need to worry about the here and now and the enormous capabilities of the here and now. So this is the engineering phase of AI now. It's not the scientific phase of AI now. So I'm grateful that organizations are paying attention to the problems of the future. Perfectly spot on. I wish we had done that with social media, quite honestly. And we're still letting social media run crazy. But when I was talking about the dangers of anthropomorphization and so on, is because a lot of the problems we have come from things we do not suspect. Many years ago, I was involved with SMS, for cell phones. What was the problem? We had a little bit of bandwidth between voice channels. What harm can happen with 140 characters? Sure, 5 cents a SMS or whatever. So we deployed SMS. 10 years later, your daughter cancels a meeting with you at the last minute because she can, via SMS. Thank you, I'm at the supermarket and she doesn't show up. Another 20 years and we have Twitter, and now we can undermine democracy. So these are the subtle situations that emerge out of technology that we have to pay attention to. Our brains are lazy by good evolutionary design. Our brains are 20% of the energy of the body consumption for 5% of the mass. So the brain is exquisitely tuned to be as lazy as possible, as frequently as possible. And so that's why we judge people on their faces very quickly. We judge how they're dressed, etc. Our brain takes shortcuts. And the enormous danger that very few people are talking about is how we're going to be taking these shortcuts into believing toys, believing the hallucinations that these sophisticated toys are going to give us. How students will take the shortcut to think less rather than more. And that's an enormous challenge ahead of us because it's always easy to take the easy way out. Okay. So very quickly, I'm going to explain the differences between what had happened 10 years ago and what's happening now and why this is so important. Technology already can do enormous computations, and they can really deal with spaces that are incredibly big. The 3 complexity is 10 to the 535, so 10 with 535 zeros worth of possibilities. Obviously, no human can do this. Here, AlphaFold was able to figure out how proteins fold, which was extremely time-consuming for humans. So when it comes to pattern processing, recognizing a pattern and applying it, modern AI is fantastic. But this was narrow because it was only tuned to a game or a specific problem to solve. This was narrow machine learning. But what has happened with the emergence of language models, the boundaries are much bigger because they suck up enormous data sets. And second, they can also suck up different data types, mathematics and history, not just Go or chess or proteins. So as a result, they're capable of both expertise and transfer. They can look at a situation and see an analogy which a human may not be able to see. So they're incredibly capable systems, but they still have problems. They're hungry for data. We don't know how they converge to a solution. They still hallucinate. Very often they'll cite a paper that doesn't exist with authors that do exist. So it's very sneaky. It did that to me the first time. I recognize all these authors, but where are the papers? Very sneaky. And it's really brittle when it comes to reasoning. It does not generalize a lot of different things, and it can generalize some very well. And so you have to be really careful about this strange boundary about what it can and cannot do. It's not a simple boundary. It's a zigzag all over the place. So it's up to us to figure out how to harness these capabilities, but keep in mind these things. We cannot trust. It's very much like arms control. Trust but verify. Same should be applied here. Here you go, Mark. Trust but verify for AI. So I was telling you that the generalized intelligence and so on was overly hyped. And this is Gartner showing that AGI is reaching its peak hype. Gen AI is at the peak hype. And they're going to go back down. And we're going to do a lot of work the same way that autonomous vehicles are now in reality mode. Sure, they can drive on a straight line in Oklahoma, but good luck driving at the Place de l'Étoile in Paris at rush hour. So, reality check. So AGI is hype, superintelligence is still sci-fi, and I'm not the only one saying this. Even these guys are saying this. Problem is, we confuse the possible with the probable. So I'm here as an engineer to focus on the probable, not on the possible. There are plenty of people who are looking at the possible and hedging against that. That's wonderful. I'm here to leverage the enormous capabilities we have. And they're enormous because we have plenty of different LLMs, we have a lot of algorithms that are changing, we have corpora of data that are being verticalized, like for education, for healthcare, for finance, etc. We have much faster hardware that's coming on. That's why Emily there was able to speak so quickly. There's a technology called Grok that allows you to have almost real-time responses. And then we can link a bunch of data sets together. This is incredibly powerful. You don't have to wait for AGI to say, wow, what are we going to do with all this? And this is what's evolving fast. So even if GPT-5 starts plateauing, which in my opinion it will, because again, it's going through its S-curve, it's going to start plateauing until we change to a different type of algorithm or we start merging algorithms. So don't expect GPT-5 to be massively better, even if Sam Altman says so, because he's a salesman. But this is already enormous, and we have to figure out what to do with all of this. So here's the problem. You know, we're always behind. Imagine a soccer player that's constantly chasing the ball. Sorry, football player. It's American. Football player. That's constantly chasing the ball, and that's the situation where we always get caught into. And that's why I'm delighted to have been working already with SEK, because there's an opportunity for independent schools to move ahead and show the rest what can be done, and not be at the laggard side of traditional education systems, public systems. Of course, we've all seen a lot of different research coming from many different horizons. This is from the IMF, and it talks about exposure to AI and so on. But this research is not very precise. We really do not understand what jobs are made of when we make these big pronouncements. What we do is we confuse tests with tasks with jobs. Just because you can answer a test like PIAC or PISA at the OECD doesn't mean that you can do the task. Just because you're doing the task doesn't mean you can do the aggregation of tasks with the coordination and the adaptation that all of these tasks need. So we have this overly simplifying mindset, which is called in psychology the Dunning-Kruger effect, where what we don't understand very well, we trivialize. For example, every night I watch brain surgery on YouTube for fun. You know, we all have our fun. And so I met a surgeon just 2 weeks ago, a gastroenterologist, and I said, hey, I can do brain surgery on you now. I know how to do it. All you have to do is you cut, you drill, you open, you cut, you suck, you close, you're done. That's how naive we are when we think about a job in general. And so in reality, whether it's a teacher or a neurosurgeon, it's a lot more complicated to do the job than to do the task, than to do the test. And so a lot of the debates we've seen so far are very superficial. And that's what drives me crazy, is that people say, oh, AI cannot create, oh, AI can create, oh, AI can do that. Very superficial conversations. And that's why we basically spend a lot of time in my team going through, and I'll show you the results of this. We also are terrible at forecasting the emergence of new jobs. Terrible. This was done by the World Economic Forum. Oops, sorry. In 2017, looking at the jobs that were created in the past 10 years that it did not forecast. It was unable to imagine that someone would ever want to be a YouTube influencer. Really? Is that a job? And yes, it is. It's for other people, not me. Or an Uber driver. You know, these things were not around. So we're terrible at imagining the new jobs. And we're also terrible at realizing how fast people adapt. This is both employers and employees worldwide, and these are their main concerns. And look, they're all talking about the same things. They're all trying to adapt furiously to this new world. So we underestimate the new jobs. We underestimate the adaptation. We overestimate what we don't understand. There you go. So you have this sort of situation, and people start freaking out. So there's no such thing as AGI takes away all the job anytime soon. And when we say all the jobs, that's really poorly defined. Again, the oversimplifications that we see around the world. But that still means that we have to deliver regardless. Even if all the jobs were gone, what are you going to do with your 10-year-old? Are you going to leave the 10-year-old at home, just trying to figure out the world? Or are you going to send him or her to a place where they can be scaffolded with their education, where they have a safe place where they can nurture their abilities, their sense of purpose, so that eventually they know how to work with AI. You're not just going to leave them at home and at age 20 magically, okay, I'm ready now. No. So education is not going to disappear. Education is still going to be here, better done, but still here. All the more importantly also, as the world becomes less and less stable, schools are a center of stability. They have to be conserved as a center of stability for the students. It may be the only thing that they have that's permanent and stable in their life. So please, let's not think that schools will disappear. And it also means that we still have to prepare for jobs partially at the high school level, and certainly, yes, at the university level. So that doesn't disappear until, of course, AGI takes away all the jobs. I don't know, 50 years from now. Right now, I'm not worried about that. And as Nieves was saying earlier, we have, she was quoting the Industrial Revolution. We are at the digital revolution level. And we invented mass schooling at the time. And now, what are we inventing? We're really sophisticating the education we have. This is not radical. This is ambitiously incremental. Again, not radical, not disruptive, but ambitiously incremental. That means, sure, we have to wonder about how do we teach better, but we also have to rethink what should we be teaching in the first place? If we have AIs capable of helping us on all sorts of things, well, what should we be teaching? Okay. Well, if you don't know what the future holds, what is a wise insurance policy? A wise insurance policy is to be versatile. So whatever is thrown your way, you can always react properly. So you want to develop a broad range of capabilities in the student, like a Swiss Army knife. And you can always sharpen that knife for a given situation later, but you have the basics. Which means you're really a Renaissance person. You have breadth of knowledge, and you have a depth of expertise, and you can add more expertise, like an M, over time, because you have a strong base to begin with. So what does the strong base mean? A strong base means paying attention to modernizing the knowledge, but also paying attention to skills and character and meta-learning, all the quote-unquote soft skills that everybody talks about, but no one does anything in a systematic way. So we're talking about creativity, critical thinking, etc. We're talking about curiosity and ethics. We're talking about metacognition, etc. So when it comes to modernizing the disciplines, well, why do we teach so much trigonometry in mathematics and we don't teach data science? Or we don't teach discrete and computational mathematics? Those are actually easier mathematics algebraically than a lot of algebra or calculus. Why do we not do that? Well, because we're not used to doing that, but that's what should be done. Why don't we teach world literature, world history? And I don't mean world literature from a Spanish or English perspective only. I mean literally Chinese, Thai literature, Korean literature, all the literatures of the world. Why don't we teach, even if we teach performing art, we teach acting, sometimes debate, very rarely, if ever, or comedy or improv. So if the world requires you to adapt quickly to situations, don't you want to be trained in improv? That's how you react fast. Someone asks a question, you know exactly how to react. That's the world we're going to be living in, and so you have to pay attention to adaptability. Where does that come from? From special sets of disciplines. Same for visual arts. Okay. But you also need to add modern disciplines. Because the old disciplines go back to the Greeks, the trivium and the quadrivium and the Middle Ages and so on, we have not left space for technology and engineering. We have not left space for social sciences, except as options. They have to be mandatory. We also sometimes teach entrepreneurship and business as options. It has to be mandatory. Entrepreneurship is the job of the future. Social sciences, if you need to understand yourself and others for a better world, why don't we teach these things? Why are they only an option? Again, why so much of the traditional disciplines and not the modern ones? And of course, here with SEK, we're developing modules for clean tech and nanotech, and we're also developing modules for the modern mathematics branches that I described. So you're already doing something in that respect, and more next year. So now let's talk about competencies. When I wrote 21st Century Skills back in 2009, I was very happy to see that it became a meme used around the world. But I became also very skeptical and disenchanted, because when we studied this with Brookings, we found out that none of these jurisdictions, none, was doing any professional development or assessments. None. Everybody just sends PDFs to the teachers and say, good luck to you. And everybody around the world has a learner profile or a portrait of a graduate or the goals of our school, sometimes with Latin even. But it doesn't hit, it's not actionable. And the point here is to make it actionable. And so, yes, we have some teachers some of the time doing ad hoc things with the presence and intent of these competencies, but we're going for quality via professional development and for evidence via assessments. That's where we need to get to. So, I mentioned that we spent a lot of time analyzing these things. For every single one of these competencies, we have a number of definitional sub-competencies, and for every single one of them, we've done an analysis of whether AI can be good at pursuing ambitious visions despite risks. Can AI be leading with initiative? Can AI engage with others, et cetera, to decide whether or not AI was going to be replacing or complementary to us. So you see the level of analysis that it takes rather than saying AI can or AI cannot. It's trivial. We have to really go into the details. And yes, AI can be very fearless and AI can be very tireless, but that's not the entire definition of courage and resilience. It takes a lot more than that. So you see, that's the level of precision that we need to get to in our education systems, where we analyze things and we're precise about definitions, we're precise about goals of what we want to achieve. Let's talk about creativity for a second. Is AI going to be more creative or less creative than humans? Okay, let's do a quick poll. Who thinks that AI is going to be more creative than humans? Okay, who thinks AI is going to be less creative than humans? That means everybody else. Okay, less creative than humans. What if I told you that 95% of human innovation was incremental and that AI can do it? I mean, you have the response right here. Why? Because a lot of innovation in the human domain is innovation by analogy and by extrapolation. AI can analogize better than humans, actually, and extrapolate better than humans. We are going to be filling a database of all the patents of the world and then train the AI on how to invent next. Many of these inventions are very incremental. Let me give you an example. There's an object that both men and women use pretty much on a daily basis. the razor blade, right? Razor blade. So someone comes up with 2 blades, right? 1 blade to 2 blades. Someone else comes up with 3 blades. What do you think AI is going to do? Analogy, 4 blades, 5 blades, 6 blades. That's the simple progression that you've seen even Gillette and others do. I think the maximum is 7 blades. I don't think there's room for your face anymore. 7 blades, you just go once and you're done. But when it comes to the rotating, the pivoting blade, that's different, because now it's no longer an analogy, it's a leap in imagination. And that leap in imagination is what humans are still good at better than AI. And that's what needs to be trained. However, even Mozart, even Picasso, have a bunch of mundane, very average things that no one listens to or looks at. Right? Mozart did a lot of stuff that no one listens to, but every once in a while you come up with a flash of brilliance. You cannot come up with these flashes of brilliance unless you go through also the boring stuff, the incremental stuff. So, tough question. Is AI more creative or less creative? Really, we should have said Charles is the wrong question. The question would have been, how are we going to co-create with AI? How can it help us create without making us so lazy that we don't do the hard part to come up with the flashes of brilliance? So you see, it's a complicated answer every step of the way. Oh, by the way, the reason why I have, so this is just one of my patents as an example, but this is really what I like. It's a book called The Dot. Peter Reynolds, the author, mentioned to me how he created that book. He fell asleep with his hand like this and on a piece of paper. When he woke up, there was a dot of ink. And so what I would have done, I would have just thrown it away. Peter, being very creative, is like, what can I do with this? And he thought of a book describing the innovation process for children. Okay, you see, this is going a little bit more than the normal. It's like a comedian. Comedians always do things that we laugh about because we recognize them. It's just that we stopped our thinking just before the funny part, and they make us discover the funny part in our thinking. That's all of that. So, I'm approaching the end. We have to pay attention to motivation of students and individualized education, personalized education. That means paying attention to the sense of purpose of the student. And because AI has very limited agency and no purpose, at least unless we surrender that agency, but AI has an identity. The data sets, the algorithms, the user interface already give it an identity. We think they're not, but they do. They have an identity, like this. We've given this an identity. And you note that I'm very careful of not calling it her, I'm calling it it. You have to battle anthropomorphization every step of the way. And so your purpose as a student, whether or not you have AGI, is to do what you love, but also what you're good at, what you can be paid for, unless you have universal basic income. Good luck with that. And what the world needs. So that's how you push the students to do a project that has a purpose that can help humankind. And we have a database of 340 projects on the UN SDGs, the global challenges for humanity, et cetera, et cetera. So you can see how you can help the student choose what they want to focus on. They want to focus on cyberspace or blockchain or health issues or food or whatever. This is how you bring them to help with a real-world problem. Lastly, we're going to be learning with the machines. That means that we can have teacher support via AI so that teachers can focus a lot more on local adaptations and personalized learning. That means that we're going to have chatbot like the one we have designed here, which is trained on education research, because name one teacher that can go to an education school, to a teacher college, and remember everything from Piaget, Vygotsky, and everything else, and know exactly when to push it in the classroom at the right moment, and have, special needs. Oh, Charles has a short-term memory problem. What do I do? What if we had the chatbot to help? And adaptive learning can help with students catching up if they haven't understood quickly enough. And that's another gain of AI where the Bloom 2 Sigma problem can be helped. We'll have to figure out what is the amount of teacher support, going from teacher only to full automation, depending on the situations. And that's it. I don't have time to go through this whole thing, but if you want to take a picture, please feel free to download. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Charles. Thank you so much. That was fascinating. You know, he's traveling from the US to join us here today, as well as our next speaker. I will introduce you right away. Before that, let's now take a step from school. We have seen this right now, to universities. We need to try to understand how can we become an AI university. And for that, we have an expert, one of the most interesting experts on the world in this specific